When his daughter threatened to cut all ties unless he paid off her debt, he made a decision that would change his life forever. Before we dive into this emotional story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next gripping tale from Daily Stories. That Father's Day, sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, bathing the table in a warm glow. The smell of roast chicken and fresh bread lingered in the air, mingling with the quiet chatter of family. On the surface, it was the kind of Sunday gathering I used to dream about. But underneath, something sharp and ugly was about to tear through the moment. Across from me, Carrara, my own flesh and blood, leaned back in her chair, that all-too-familiar smirk tugging at her lips. She slid a small, crumpled scrap of paper across the table toward me. "Here you go, Dad. Happy Father's Day," she said with exaggerated cheer. "If you win, remember half is mine." Her voice was bright, but it carried that sly edge I knew too well. I picked up the paper, smoothing it gently under my fingers. A lottery ticket, $2. The number felt like a slap, not because of the money itself, but because of the message behind it. In that moment, it wasn't a gift. It was a reminder of how little she thought I deserved. I forced a smile, the kind you give when you refuse to let someone see you flinch. "Very thoughtful, sweetheart," I said, each word tasting like sand. Before I could even set the ticket down, Carrara's eyes lit up with a different kind of excitement. She turned toward the other end of the table, where Eric, her father-in-law, sat with perfect posture, his crisp white shirt catching the light like it had been ironed just seconds before. From under her chair, Kara pulled out a box wrapped in deep red paper tied with a golden ribbon that shimmered in the lamplight. Even the ribbon looked expensive, the kind of thing you didn't throw away, but folded carefully for reuse. She placed the box in front of Eric like a prize on display. He opened it slowly, savoring the moment. Inside, nestled in folds of cream-colored silk, were 2 gleaming cruise tickets. "These cost $13,000, Kara announced proudly, her voice ringing with satisfaction. "Eric deserves the very best for everything he's done for our family." I watched as Eric's well-manicured fingers traced the gold lettering. He gave a slow, approving nod, then looked directly at me. "Now this is a proper gift," he said, a faint smirk curling his lips. "Your father taught you well." The words floated above the table like smoke from a dying candle. No one laughed. Margaret, my sister, cleared her throat but said nothing. Tommy, my nephew, stared at his hands as if they held all the answers. Carrara's laugh rang out sharp and clear. She looked at Eric and something passed between them, a knowing glance that tightened the knot in my chest. "Dad always said, actions speak louder than words," she said, almost sing-song. "Some people show love with grand gestures and others." She let the sentence trail off, her eyes flicking toward the ticket in my hand. I gripped the flimsy slip of paper, willing my fingers not to shake. "I really appreciate the thought, Carrara," I said quietly. "Oh, it's just a little joke," she waved dismissively. "But seriously, if you win the jackpot, I expect my cut. After all, I paid for it." Eric's chuckle was low, almost smug. "Maybe next year Stephen will surprise us all with something more substantial." The golden afternoon light shifted across the room, casting long shadows. Around the table, faces froze mid-expression. Margaret's fork hovered in the air. Sarah, my nephew's wife, suddenly became fascinated with the family photos on the wall. Even Jake, my usually phone-obsessed grandson, looked up with questioning eyes. Eric fanned the cruise tickets like a royal flush, his voice brimming with pride. 2 weeks in the Mediterranean, now that's a gift. What they didn't know, what none of them could possibly imagine, was that the $2 ticket they mocked would soon be worth $120 million. And that I was about to give Carrara a lesson in gratitude she would remember for the rest of her life. First-class accommodations, private balcony, all meals included, Eric said, almost savoring each word. The kind of trip that makes memories you'll talk about for the rest of your life. I nodded slowly, my throat tightening. "Sounds wonderful." "It is wonderful," Kara chimed in without missing a beat. "Eric's always been there for us, financially especially. He helped us buy our house, paid for Jake's private school, even covers our country club membership. He's earned something special." The lottery ticket in my hand felt like it might crumble to dust if I squeezed any harder. And in that moment, my mind traveled backward to all those years in the garage, the smell of oil and grease clinging to my clothes. My hands cracked and stained from turning wrenches. The double shifts. The nights I came home after 16 hours on my feet, too exhausted to even make it to bed, falling asleep in my chair instead. Every extra hour I worked was to pay for Carrera's tuition, her textbooks, her future. Well, sir, I said quietly, each word pulled from somewhere deep. I hope you both enjoy the cruise. Oh, we will, Eric replied, carefully sliding the tickets back into their silk-lined box like a man tucking away treasure. This is how families should treat each other, with generosity and respect. The conversation drifted on to other topics, but I barely heard a word. My eyes stayed fixed on the tiny slip of paper in my palm. $2, the same amount I used to give Kara for ice cream when she was 7. Back then, she'd beam at me like I'd just given her the moon. After dinner, they left in a flurry of polite goodbyes. Outside, I heard the car doors slam, engines start, voices fading into the distance. And then it was quiet, the deep, settling quiet of my solitary life. I sat there for a long time at the same table, the lottery ticket resting beside my empty coffee cup. Through the window, the last streaks of sunlight slipped away from my dining room walls. I looked around at the life I had built, the family photos framed neatly on the wall, the worn furniture I'd saved for piece by piece, the small Father's Day decorations I'd set out earlier that morning in the hope of, well, something warmer than this. By the next morning, the ticket lay there in the soft light of dawn, forgotten, or so I thought. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, going through my monthly bank statement like I'd done for 40 years. In my younger days, I'd counted every penny, making sure there was enough for school supplies and groceries. Now, as a retiree, I still counted carefully, and not out of necessity, but out of habit. I traced the list of transactions with my finger. The usual suspects, utility bills, grocery store runs, the modest total from the Father's Day dinner. All neat, all predictable, until I reached one line that stopped me cold. Premium travel services, $13,600. I stared at it, blinking as if the numbers might rearrange themselves into something more reasonable. But they didn't budge. The date was last Thursday. I'd been nowhere near a travel agency. A sick realization crept in. Carrera still had authorized access to my account, something I'd set up years ago after her mother passed, just in case of emergencies. I had forgotten all about it until now. My hands began to tremble as I reached for my phone. Each ring on the other end seemed to echo in my quiet kitchen, mingling with the pounding of my own heartbeat. "Hello, Dad?" Her voice came through calm and distracted, carrying that flat edge of politeness she reserved for when I interrupted her busy life. "Kara," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady, "I'm looking at my bank statement." "There's a charge here," I said slowly, reading from the screen, "for over $13,000 from something called Premium Travel Services." For a moment, there was only silence on the line, the kind that stretches just long enough to make your chest feel tight. Then came a light, airy laugh, the kind people use when they want to brush something off. "Oh, that," Kara said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I bought Dad Eric his cruise. He deserves something nice for once." Her words landed like a slap across my face. I gripped the phone tighter. You took $13,000 from my account without asking me." "I didn't take anything, Dad," she replied, her tone turning faintly annoyed. "I used family money for a family gift." My pulse quickened. "Kara, that's theft," my voice cracked on the word. "You stole from me. It's not stealing when it's family money," she snapped back, sharper now. "Eric has always been there for us financially. He's helped us when we needed it. This is just returning the favor." I swallowed hard, my knuckles whitening around the phone. "I'm your father, Kara. I raised you. I worked double shifts to pay for your college, your textbooks, and Eric helped us both move beyond that," she interrupted, cutting clean through my words. "He's shown us what real success looks like, what it means to be generous, to live well, to give meaningful gifts instead of... She stopped, and in the pause, I could hear the faint sound of her son, long, dismissive instead of lottery tickets. The cruelty in her voice hollowed me out. I sat there in my quiet kitchen, listening to the stranger on the other end of the line. But she wasn't always a stranger. She was my daughter. The same little girl who used to curl up on my lap while I read bedtime stories. The teenager who sobbed into my shoulder the night her mother died. The young woman who once called me her hero. "Dad, are you there?" "I'm here," I whispered. "Look," she continued, her voice softening slightly, but losing none of its condescension. "I know you're upset, but think about it rationally. Eric earned this. He's successful. He's contributed so much to our family's well-being. He deserves recognition for everything he's done." "And what about everything I've done?" I asked quietly. There was a long pause. When she spoke again, her voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. "You did what fathers are supposed to do." Eric went above and beyond. And then the line went dead. I sat there, the dial tone droning through my empty kitchen like a funeral bell. My hands, the same hands that once cradled her as a newborn, steadied her bicycle on the sidewalk, clapped until they stung at her graduation, shook as I set the phone down. My eyes drifted toward the nightstand. Sitting there was the lottery ticket, the $2 gift she had tossed at me like table scraps for a dog. Even that had been paid for with my own stolen money. The irony was so perfect, so bitter, it almost made me laugh. Almost. Instead, I picked it up, crumpling it into my fist. I marched to the kitchen trash can and let it drop. The soft thud as it hit the bottom among coffee grounds, eggshells, and empty cans felt like a punctuation mark on the life she just devalued. Suddenly, the walls of my home felt closer, the air heavier. I could hear her voice in every corner, dripping with that tone I'd never forget. I couldn't stay here. Not right now. I needed air. I needed distance. I grabbed my jacket, shoved my arms through the sleeves, and walked straight out the door. My legs carried me down the familiar streets of my neighborhood on autopilot, each step heavier than the last. The morning air was cool and sharp, filled with the ordinary sounds of suburban life, the steady hum of a lawnmower sputtering to life, children shrieking with laughter somewhere in the distance, the muffled thud of a basketball against a driveway. Mrs. Patterson was in her front garden, bent low over her tomato plants, her arthritic fingers handling the vines like they were spun from glass. She looked up and waved, her smile as warm as the summer sun. "Beautiful morning, Stephen." "Yes, it is," I answered automatically, my voice flat, the words leaving my mouth without touching my heart. For me, the day felt anything but beautiful. I passed the Henderson house where Tom was standing on the lawn with his grandson. The boy's laughter floated toward me on the breeze, high, unrestrained, and pure. Tom was showing him how to throw a baseball, his hands gently guiding the boy's grip, his voice patient. I remember doing the same with Kara. I could still see her small hands wrapped clumsily around the ball, her brow furrowed in concentration. The sudden explosion of joy on her face when she finally made a perfect throw. When had that changed? When had my love, the love that once meant everything to her, become something insufficient? When had my life, my efforts, become something to be dismissed, even looked down on? The question stayed with me as I walked down Maple Street, past the little corner market where I used to buy her candy after school, past the park where she had played for hours on warm summer afternoons. Each memory that once glowed with nostalgia now felt tainted, warped by the bitter knowledge of what she had become and what she thought of me now. My phone buzzed in my pocket. For one fleeting moment, a fragile hope stirred in my chest. Maybe Kara had reconsidered. Maybe she had realized what she'd done. "Dad, I talked to Eric about the money situation. He thinks you're overreacting. It's not like you needed it for anything important. We'll pay you back when we can. Maybe for Christmas." I stopped dead in the middle of the sidewalk. Read it again. Then again, the words burned hotter each time. "When we can." As if 13,000 was pocket change. As if my financial security was negotiable. As if I should be grateful for the possibility of getting it back someday. Before I could type a reply, my phone rang. My sister's name, Margaret, lit up the screen. "Stephen, are you okay?" she asked as soon as I answered, her voice tight. Kara called me. She said you were upset about some money thing. She stole $30,000 from my account, Margaret. My voice was flat, stripped of all emotion. To buy her father-in-law a cruise, silence on the other end, then incredulous. She what? She still had access to my account from years ago. She used it to buy Eric a $13,000 cruise for Father's Day. My voice cracked, but I kept going. She gave me a $2 lottery ticket and said half the winnings would be hers. Jesus, Stephen. Margaret's voice was low, like she was speaking to herself. Are you sure? Maybe there's some mistake. She admitted it. I cut in. Said it wasn't really stealing because it was all family money. A bitter laugh escaped my throat. And apparently Eric deserved it because he's been generous to them, unlike me. There was a pause when Margaret spoke again. Her voice was softer, gentler, carrying the kind of sympathy that doesn't fix anything, but still makes the ache in your chest a little sharper. Stephen, I'm so sorry. I didn't know when she had changed so completely. I didn't even have the right word for it at first until the truth settled on my tongue like something bitter. Cruel, I said at last. She's become cruel. Margaret was quiet for a moment on the other end, her silence heavier than words. She offered to come over to call Carrera herself to step into the storm and shield me somehow. But what could she really do? There's no fixing it when someone you love shows you without a shred of doubt exactly what you mean to them. No speech, no intervention, no careful reasoning could erase the truth she had placed in my hands like a stone. I walked home slowly as though my body had aged decades in the span of an hour. Each step dragged, not from fatigue, but from the weight of disappointment and disbelief. When I finally opened my front door, the air inside felt different. My home, once my refuge, seemed smaller now, shabier. Not because anything had changed physically, but because I could suddenly see it the way she must have seen it, through the cool, dismissive eyes of someone who found it lacking. In the kitchen, the trash can stood quietly in the corner, holding the crumpled $2 lottery ticket. That worthless scrap of paper, meant as a joke, given with a smirk, had become the mocking emblem of everything this nightmare had stirred up. I stared at it for a long time, remembering the feel of it in my hand, the laughter in her voice as she tossed it across the table. Tomorrow, I promised myself I would call the bank. I would revoke her access, put locks on the doors she had learned to walk through without knocking. I would take the steps I should have taken years ago, but tonight I would sit alone in my quiet house and grieve. Not just for the $13,000 that was gone, not even for the blatant disrespect. I grieved for my daughter, the girl who once looked at me with trust and joy, the one who used to slip her small hand into mine without hesitation. Somewhere along the way, that relationship had died without me noticing. And now I was left only with its cold remains. The lottery ticket stayed in the trash, forgotten and worthless, while I mourned something infinitely more valuable that I would never get back. Morning came with the sharp, almost cruel clarity that follows a night without sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, my coffee untouched and cooling, staring at the bank's customer service number written on a scrap of paper. For the first time in 24 hours, my hands were steady. First National Bank Customer Service. This is Rebecca. How can I help you? I need to revoke authorized access to my account, I told her. Someone has been making unauthorized purchases. Her voice was calm, efficient, laced with a polite kind of sympathy that didn't pity me but understood the seriousness of what I was saying. She guided me through the process step by step, her tone the steady hand I needed in that moment. In less than 15 minutes, it was done. Carrera's access terminated. New security measures in place. I hung up the phone and felt something I hadn't felt in years. The solid, unshakable certainty of protecting myself. When I looked around my kitchen again, it didn't seem shabby anymore. It was modest, yes, but it was honest. Clean. Mine. My eyes drifted to the trash can again. The crumpled lottery tickets still lay there, half buried in coffee grounds. That $2 joke, bought with my own stolen money, had been tossed back at me as though I were some kind of charity case. I stood over it, staring down. The irony hit me like a slap. She had stolen from me to buy me a gift, then claimed half of the potential winnings as hers. It was such a small thing, but in that moment, it told the whole story. With a sudden sharp surge of anger, the kind that doesn't explode but burns hot and steady, I snatched the lottery ticket from the trash. My fingers flattened it against the counter, smoothing the wrinkles as though the act could somehow flatten the chaos in my chest. The number stared back at me. 074233542, Powerball 18. I traced them with my eyes until they were etched into my mind. Digits that had somehow become a symbol of everything broken between my daughter and me. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a ledger of disrespect, betrayal, and entitlement. With a bitter laugh that never made it past my throat, I crushed the ticket in my hand again, this time with deliberate force, and tossed it back into the bin. The sound it made, a soft, papery thud, felt far too small for the weight it carried. The morning stretched out before me, empty and silent. The walls of my kitchen still seemed to hum faintly with yesterday's arguments, as if betrayal could seep into the drywall. I had to get out. I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside, letting my feet decide the path. The air was crisp enough to bite, but it felt cleaner than anything inside my house. Out here, the world smelled of cut grass and brewing coffee, not resentment. Somewhere nearby, a lawnmower roared to life, its steady hum blending with the sound of children's laughter drifting over back fences. A dog barked, a screen door slammed. Life went on. Mrs. Patterson was in her garden again, wearing the same faded sun hat I'd seen for years. Her hands, worn but precise, coaxed life from the soil with a tenderness that might made the roses bloom like they knew they were safe with her. She looked up when I passed. "Morning, Stephen, you're out early." "Couldn't sleep," I admitted, leaning on her fence. "Figured a walk might help." She gave me a slow, knowing nod. Sometimes the best thinking happens when your feet are moving. My Harold used to say that. Harold, her late husband, had been a mechanic like me, a man who measured worth in work well done and kept his word like it was cash in the bank. He was right about that, I said before moving on. A few houses down, Tom Henderson was hosing down his car, his grandson helping by turning the driveway into a shallow lake. The kids' laughter rang out high and unfiltered, while Tom just grinned and let him soak his shoes. It was a kind of joy that didn't come with conditions or fine print. 2 blocks later, I passed the corner market where I'd bought carrot candy as a kid. Mr. Chen stood in his window arranging apples and oranges in perfect rows, his hands moving with the same care I'd seen for decades. He'd never gotten rich, but he'd built a reputation that was worth more than any balance sheet. Honest work, fair prices, respect for everyone who walked through his door. These people, Mrs. Patterson, her mom, Mr. Chen, they understood something Kara had long forgotten. That dignity comes from what you give to the world, not what you take from it. My phone buzzed in my pocket. For just a moment, hope bloomed where hurt had been. Maybe she'd thought it over. Maybe she'd realized. The message lit up the screen. "Dad, I talked to Eric about the money situation. He thinks you're overreacting. It's not like you needed it for anything important. We'll pay you back when we can, maybe for Christmas." The words hit me like cold water, but there was no shock left to feel, only a steady, hard truth. I froze mid-step, the weight of her words sinking in like cold iron. My thumb hovered over the phone screen as I read her message again slowly. Each line was another twist of the knife. The casual dismissal of my financial security, the breezy assumption that $13,000 was somehow a rounding error in my life, the hollow, half-hearted promise maybe for Christmas as if repayment were a favor, not a responsibility. It all condensed into a single, unshakable truth. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a bad day. This was who my daughter had become. And this careless disregard was what I truly meant to her. Now, without another thought, I deleted the message. No reply, no justification, just silence. Then I kept walking, letting the familiar streets cradle me in their quiet steadiness here among people who still believed in showing up for one another. I felt grounded. Whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms with my dignity intact. Somewhere back in my kitchen, the trash can still held that crumpled lottery ticket. Now nothing more than paper and broken illusions. I left it there, forgotten, and kept moving forward. 3 days passed like a deep exhale. 3 days of coffee steaming in the cool morning air of simple meals and of the steady calm that comes when you truly know you've done the right thing even if it cost you. That morning, I was standing at the stove stirring scrambled eggs in my old cast iron skillet when the phone shattered the silence with its sharp, demanding ring. I answered, and before I could even say hello, her voice detonated through the receiver. "Dad, what the hell did you do to my card?" Her words came fast, sharp, and hot. It was declined at Nordstrom. "Do you have any idea how humiliating that was?" I set the spatula down carefully, surprised at how steady my hand was. "I removed your access," I said evenly, "after you took $13,000 from my account." "I didn't steal anything," she snapped, her voice rising to that familiar teenage pitch, the one she'd used years ago when caught in a lie. "That money was for family, for someone who actually contributes to this family." "You didn't ask permission, Kara," I said, each word deliberate. "You just took it." Through the phone, I caught the sound of rustling shopping bags, the faint hum of mall traffic, the background soundtrack to her priorities. I was standing there with an $800 handbag. "Dad, 800. The sales associate ran my card 3 times before telling me loud enough for everyone that it was declined. People were staring. I looked like her voice faltered, dripping with disdain, like some kind of common person who can't afford her purchases. The way she said common person hit me like a punch to the chest, as if living within your means was a flaw, a mark of failure. I took a breath, steady and slow. "I'm sorry you were embarrassed," I said quietly, "but that doesn't change what you did." "What I did," she let out a sharp, humorless laugh that sliced through the air like broken glass. "What I did was treat Eric with the respect he deserves, something you've never learned to do." I carried the phone to the kitchen table and lowered myself into the same chair where just days ago I'd stared in disbelief at the bank statement that proved my own daughter had stolen from me. My fingers brushed against the wood grain, grounding myself. "Kara," I said slowly, "I raised you. I worked 60-hour weeks, skipped vacations, patched up old clothes, and drove secondhand cars so you could go to college. I thought that counted for something." Her reply came fast, venom wrapped in a mocking lilt. "And Eric helped us move beyond all that," she snapped. "He's shown us what real success looks like, what it means to be generous, not hoarding money like some bitter old miser." The words landed like a punch to the gut. 40 years of disciplined saving, of going without so my family never had to, reduced to an insult. All those nights I came home bone-tired but proud that we had stability. And this was how she saw it. "You're going to regret this decision, Dad." Her voice shifted lower now, colder, carrying a sharp edge I had never heard before. "You think you can humiliate me publicly and just walk away? You think there won't be consequences?" I swallowed, feeling a tightness in my chest. "Kara, I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm protecting myself." "No," she shot back, each word deliberate and icy. "You're being selfish, petty, cruel, but I won't let you get away with it. I have friends, Dad. People who matter in this community. People who actually understand what family loyalty means." And then click, the line went dead, the sharp sound echoing through the stillness of my kitchen. I stared at the silent phone for a long moment before setting it down. My scrambled eggs sat abandoned in the skillet, the edges crisping into an unappetizing brown. Even after reheating them, they tasted like ash. That evening, I tried to lose myself in television. Anything to stop replaying her words in my head. I flicked through channels without focus. A nature documentary about wolves. A cooking show filled with impossible sugar sculptures. A news panel droning on about economic policies that seemed galaxies away from my quiet personal disaster. My tablet sat on the coffee table untouched. For more than a day, I'd been avoiding social media, avoiding the urge to see what Kara was doing or saying about me. But avoidance has a shelf life. Eventually, curiosity cracked my resolve. I opened Facebook. The feed greeted me with the usual neighbors posting pictures of their gardens, old friends sharing grainy vacation photos, distant cousins celebrating birthdays with store-bought sheet cakes. And then I saw it. Carrara's post sat pinned at the very top of my feed, accompanied by a carefully staged photo, her eyes red and swollen, the faint shimmer of tears, likely applied with the same precision she used for makeup. "Having to write this breaks my heart," the caption began. "But I need support right now. My father has decided to cut off my access to what has always been our family money. After years of me being there for him and helping him through Mom's death, managing his affairs when he couldn't, he suddenly decided I'm not worthy of his trust." I just stared at the screen, my stomach turning. All because I bought Eric, who has been more of a father figure to our family than anyone, a gift. And yes, I used money from an account that was just sitting there untouched. I never imagined my own father could be so selfish, so heartless. Now I'm honestly questioning everything I thought I knew about the man who raised me. Her words glared at me from the glowing screen, each one a carefully aimed dagger. Beneath the post, the little blue thumbs and red hearts tallied up. 47 likes, 23 comments. And with each one, the knot in my stomach pulled tighter. "OMG, Kara, I'm so sorry. Older people can get so paranoid about money. Your father should be grateful to have such a caring daughter. This is awful. Eric is such a wonderful man. He deserved that gift. Your dad is being ridiculous. Family money should benefit the whole family. Hang in there, honey." Each comment was like another verdict in a trial I hadn't agreed to, rendered by a jury of people who knew only her side of the story. I closed the tablet with a snap, the soft thud echoing in the darkened living room. I just sat there for a long while, staring into the shadows, listening to the faint pops and creaks of the house settling. Somewhere in my bedroom, buried in the kitchen trash, lay the crumpled lottery ticket that had sparked all of this. A stupid $2 joke. A joke that somehow managed to peel back every illusion I'd had about my relationship with my daughter. The next evening, I found myself in the same chair, the remote control resting loosely in my hand, my thumb pressing buttons with no real thought. The television flickered from one scene to another, a cooking show filled with glossy, impossible French pastries. A 90s sitcom I'd seen so many times the punchlines were automatic. Local news droning on about city budget cuts. But I wasn't really watching. All day, Carrera's post had been gnawing at me. I'd seen the looks. The neighbor who suddenly avoided my gaze. The grocery store cashier whose polite smile was just a little too thin. Her version of events was spreading faster than truth could hope to catch up. And I was doing nothing to stop it. Click. A nature special about lions. Click. A game show. Click. Good evening, Ohio. Welcome to tonight's Powerball drawing, where we have a rollover jackpot of 12 million. I almost pressed the button again, ready to skip over it, but the announcer's absurdly cheerful tone made me pause. There was something bitterly funny about it. Here I was being painted as a greedy miser for trying to protect what little I had, while someone out there was about to walk away with more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. Tonight's winning numbers are the announcer's voice dropped into that ceremonial register, the kind reserved for grand occasions. 7, 14, 23, 35, 42, and the Powerball is 18. The numbers rolled across the screen, meaningless to most, except that somewhere deep down, I knew they had just set another story in motion for someone else. My hand froze mid-click on the remote, my breath catching in my throat. Those numbers, they weren't just familiar, they were seared into my memory like a brand. I fumbled for a pen on the coffee table, my fingers clumsy and trembling, and scrolled the numbers across the back of a crumpled envelope as the announcer repeated them in that slow, ceremonious voice meant to make each digit feel monumental. 743, 3442, Powerball 18. The ink barely had time to dry before my pulse began to hammer in my ears. I knew these numbers, not just from somewhere. I knew them. I had stared at them long enough to memorize them in one bitter, mocking moment. The lottery ticket, the crumpled, coffee-stained scrap I tossed into the trash 3 days ago, spitefully, angrily after Kara had all but laughed in my face. I lurched to my feet, my knees suddenly unsteady, and staggered into the kitchen. The trash can sat there, innocently by the counter, a silent witness to my mistake. I ripped off the lid and plunged my hands into the mess. Coffee grounds, rotting banana peels, soggy paper towels, digging with desperate urgency. Then at the very bottom, my fingers brushed against something stiff and damp. The ticket, it was stuck to the side of an empty yogurt container, stained, wrinkled, and smelling faintly of old garbage. But the numbers were still there, still perfectly legible. I carried it to the sink, rinsing away the sludge with shaking hands. There it was, every single number, a perfect match. Cheshire 14, 23, 35, 42, Powerball 18. For a moment, I just stood there, the sound of the faucet rushing in my ears, my mind refusing to fully accept what my eyes were seeing. The $2 joke, the insult Kara had tossed to me like table scraps, was worth $120 million. I sank into the nearest chair, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. The ticket lay between my palms like a holy relic, damp from the sink, creased and battered from my earlier rage. Carrera's voice replayed in my head as sharp as if she were in the room. If you win, remember half is mine, half of this. I grabbed my phone and dialed the lottery hotline, my fingers trembling so violently I almost dropped it. I followed the robotic voice through the prompts, barely breathing until it delivered the verdict. The winning Powerball numbers for tonight's drawing are 714233542 with Powerball 18. The jackpot amount is $120 million. The voice clicked off, but its echo rang in my mind like a church bell. I looked around my small kitchen as if seeing it for the first time. Outdated appliances, faded linoleum, the dented table where I AE'd alone every night. All of it suddenly felt fragile, temporary, like a stage set about to be torn down. The tickets sat there drying in the glow of the overhead light, holding a fortune I could barely comprehend. That night I didn't sleep. Not really. I kept alternating between holding the ticket up to the light for the 100th time just to be sure it was real, and lying awake in the dark staring at the ceiling as the magnitude of what had just happened sank in. By the time the pale light of morning crept through my blinds, I had convinced myself it had to be some kind of fever dream, a cruel mirage conjured by stress, loneliness, and the stale air of my quiet little house. Surely, I'd imagine, shouldn't it? Surely no one just finds $120 million in the bottom of a garbage can. But the numbers didn't lie. The ticket sat on my kitchen table like an unblinking witness, its coffee stains and crumpled edges proof of its strange journey. Every time I glanced at it, my stomach did a slow, dizzy flip. The Ohio Lottery Commission building in downtown Columbus looked nothing like I'd pictured. Sleek glass and steel pushed up into a sky, heavy with March clouds. Security guards in crisp uniforms manned the doors, and the whole place radiated the kind of seriousness you'd expect from people whose job was to guard life-changing fortunes. I carried the ticket inside in a clear plastic sleeve, gripping it like a priceless artifact. My palms were damp despite the chill in the air. Mr. Woods, a neatly dressed woman with sharp eyes and a polished smile, approached. Her name tag read Janet Chen. She took the sleeve from my trembling hands and studied the battered ticket with the quiet precision of a jeweler examining a rare diamond. "This is quite a story," she said, her voice measured. "Found it in your trash." "Threw it away," I admitted, my throat tight. In anger, my daughter bought it for me as a Father's Day gift. But let's just say the circumstances were complicated. Janet didn't press for details. She simply nodded, slid the ticket beneath some sort of specialized scanner, and waited as the machine hummed softly. "We see all kinds of situations here," she said finally. "The important thing is verification. And I'm happy to tell you, Mr. Woods," she looked up, her smile widening just a fraction, "this is indeed a winning ticket." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. My fingers dug into the arms of the chair, grounding me in the sterile fluorescent-lit room. But Janet continued, "For a jackpot this size, our verification process takes 48 hours. The ticket's authenticity will be confirmed through multiple security checks. Legal documents will be prepared, payment arrangements finalized. There will also be publicity protocols we'll need to discuss." I nodded and signed whatever she slid across the desk. Tax forms, payout options, disclaimers, my pen moving automatically while my mind tried to catch up. Numbers swam in my head, percentages, deadlines. But through it all, one fact stood clear as crystal. I was worth $120 million. The drive home felt like drifting through a movie set. Every familiar landmark seemed slightly unreal. The corner grocery store, Mrs. Patterson's perfectly trimmed rose garden, the faded playground where Kara had learned to read. All the pieces of my old life were still there, but I felt like a stranger drifting past them. I'd been home for less than an hour when the screech of tires shattered the silence. Carrara's silver sedan came to a stop in my driveway at a dangerous angle. She didn't knock, she stormed in. Her cheeks were flushed, eyes bright with a feverish mix of excitement and triumph. "Dad," she said, almost breathless, "I heard about the lottery. Some woman at work knows somebody who works at the commission. She saw your name on the winner's list." I stayed seated at the kitchen table. The official lottery paperwork spread before me like evidence in a courtroom. "Hello, Kara. Don't hello me." She leaned forward, bracing her hands on the table. "Do you realize what this means? We're millionaires, remember what I said? Half is mine." "That was a gift, Kara." My voice came out steadier than I expected. "You can't take back a gift." Her smile faltered, her posture stiffening. The sparkle of excitement in her eyes hardened into something colder. "We had an agreement," she said. "Everyone at that dinner heard me say it, Dad. Witnesses. Legal witnesses." Carrera's words came out sharp, clipped, like she'd been rehearsing them ever since she heard the news. "You threw that ticket at me like it was trash," I said quietly, my voice steady, even though my chest felt tight. "And you bought it with money you stole from my account. This was never about sharing anything." Her eyes flashed, her voice pitching higher. "Stole? I used family money for a family purpose, and now you're trying to cheat me out of what's rightfully mine." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see the little girl who used to curl up in my lap, giggling through bedtime stories. That girl was gone. In her place stood a stranger, someone who measured love in dollar signs and viewed my good fortune as a threat rather than a blessing. "The ticket was a gift," I repeated, each word deliberate. "Whatever your intentions, whatever you said in that moment, the second you gave it to me, it became mine." Her mouth twisted into something cold, almost unrecognizable. "I'll sue you." She slammed her palm on the kitchen table so hard the lottery papers jumped, their official seals and signatures trembling in place. "I'll prove that ticket belongs to me. I'll drag you into court and make sure everyone knows what kind of man you really are." I met her gaze without flinching. "And what kind of man am I, Kara?" She hesitated for just a breath, her chest rising and falling with barely contained anger. For a fleeting instant, something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, maybe even shame, but it was gone before I could name it, replaced by an icy resolve, the kind who steals from his own daughter. She spun on her heel and stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the window panes. Her engine roared to life, then faded into the distance, leaving behind a silence so thick it felt like it might swallow me whole. I stared down at the papers spread before me. Proof of my $20 million win, more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. And yet, all I felt was an exhaustion that went bone deep. The next morning, I woke to my phone buzzing relentlessly on the nightstand. 15 missed calls, 12 text messages. Notifications stacked so high they blurred together. The first Facebook post had gone up at 6:47 a.m., just as people were settling in with their coffee and morning news. Urgent. My father has stolen my lottery ticket and is claiming the entire jackpot for himself. This is the same man who cut off my access to family money and publicly humiliated me. The ticket was my gift to him, with a clear understanding that winnings would be shared. This is elder abuse in reverse. When elderly people become so obsessed with money, they'll cheat their own children. Please share this post. I need people to know the truth about what's happening. Beneath her words was a photo of me from last Christmas, mid-laugh but frozen in a moment that made me look stern, even cold. My holiday sweater did nothing to soften the impression, and just like that, the court of public opinion had been summoned. Beneath Carrara's post, the comments spread like digital wildfire, angry, sympathetic, judgmental, each one fanning the flames higher. But she hadn't stopped there. On Instagram, a tearful video appeared. She sat alone in her car, dashboard lights glowing faintly, rain streaking the windows. Mascara traced dark rivers down her cheeks as she spoke into the camera bar with trembling urgency. "I don't usually air family business like this," she began, voice breaking, "but I'm desperate. My own father, my father has stolen my lottery ticket, literally stolen it. This now he's claiming the entire 120 million for himself. I bought that ticket as a Father's Day gift. I even joked, half is mine because that's what you do with family, right? You share much. But apparently my father took that as some kind of legal loophole, not a sign of love from his daughter. Her words dripped with betrayal, each syllable crafted to pierce hearts. Meanwhile, Eric had launched his own coordinated attack. LinkedIn, Facebook, even a carefully worded statement in an industry forum. His post carried the polished, authoritative tone of a man used to influencing people in boardrooms. Witnessing financial elder abuse is devastating, one post read. But reverse elder abuse, when parents betray their children for financial gain, can be just as destructive. My wife is heartbroken. This lottery ticket was purchased as a gift with a clear verbal agreement to share the winnings. Yet my father-in-law now claims sole ownership. This is not just about money. This is about the collapse of trust in family values. By the time my phone rang again, I already knew the storm was spreading. It was Margaret. "Stephen, what in God's name is going on? My neighbor just called to ask if you really stole Carrara's lottery ticket. Social media is organic crazy." I tried to explain, but even to my own ears, my side of the story sounded like knots I couldn't untangle. Yes, Kara had bought the ticket. Yes, she joked about sharing. Yes, I had actually won. But no, I didn't believe I owed her anything. "Stephen," Margaret said softly, "she did buy it for you with money she stole from my account." I shot back. By noon, the fire had leapt from personal networks into the wider digital neighborhood. Local Facebook groups buzzed with debates about family loyalty, legal obligations, and the moral weight of gifts. On the Nextdoor app, neighbors dissected the scandal like amateur jurors, some branding me the greedy lottery winner on Maple Street. I made the mistake of reading the comments under Carrara's posts. "This is disgusting. How can a father do this to his daughter? Lawyers need to get involved. This is theft." Plain and simple, I know this family. The daughter has always been so generous and kind. The father's always been weird about money. Team Kara all the way. No way an old man should keep money that belongs to his daughter. Eric's professional circle had joined in too. Colleagues from his investment firm reposted his statement with grim captions about financial ethics and moral bankruptcy. Even friends I'd known for years were now publicly siding with the Carrara. Each share and comment tightening the noose around my reputation. And all I could do was watch the narrative spin out of my control. I shut my laptop and walked to the kitchen window, staring out at the street I'd called home for more than 3 decades. It had always been a place of quiet familiarity, a neighborhood where people knew each other's kids, swapped lawn care tips, and waved in passing. But today 3 of my neighbors stood clustered near my mailbox, their heads bent together, voices hushed. I didn't need to hear the words to know what they were discussing. When they noticed me at the window, they froze for a heartbeat, then broke apart like startled deer, pretending to inspect their yards or cross the street. The shift was instant and awkward. They weren't just neighbors anymore. They were spectators at the slow-motion wreckage of my life. My phone buzzed on the counter, a text from an unknown number. "Channel 6 wants to interview you about the lottery controversy. Can you call us?" Before I could process that, another ping. "Columbus Dispatch, seeking comment on family lottery dispute." And another legal representation available for lottery ticket disputes. Free consultation. It was like being caught in a storm you never saw coming. I powered off my phone and sat alone at my kitchen table. The official lottery paperwork still lay there, spread out like crime scene evidence. My supposed windfall turned into the proof of my guilt. Through the glass, I could see more neighbors outside, their sideways glances and carefully measured distance speaking volumes. In an age where judgment traveled faster than truth, I'd already been tried and convicted in the court of public opinion. The irony cut deep. I was worth $120 million, yet I had never felt more isolated, more despairing, more utterly alone in my life. Morning sunlight spilled across the table, casting long, accusing shadows over the printed screenshots of Carrara's social media posts I'd laid out in front of me. Each comment, each share, each reaction was another twist of the knife. Strangers siding with my daughter, acquaintances piling on, old friends making their loyalties known without hesitation. The warmth of my coffee had long since faded, but the bitterness lingered as I scrolled through what felt like a public execution of my character. The shrill ring of my landline shattered the stillness. That old-fashioned metallic clang I hadn't heard in months. Caller ID displayed a number I didn't know, but its blocky professional sequence hinted at a business line. "Mr. Woods, this is William Johnson, Eric's father." The voice was calm, deliberate, carrying the unmistakable weight of a man who'd spent a lifetime negotiating high-stakes deals in polished boardrooms. "I believe we need to talk." I tightened my grip on the receiver. "I'm not sure what there is to discuss, Mr. Johnson. There's quite a lot, actually." A pause. "Could we meet this morning? Murphy's Diner on 5th Street in 1 hour." Murphy's a modest little family-owned place I'd been to countless times for their Saturday breakfast special. The kind of place where everyone knew the waitresses by name, and the kind of place I couldn't imagine Eric setting foot in. "May I ask what this is about?" I said, my chest tightening. "The lottery ticket," William replied simply, "and what I witnessed on Father's Day, my pulse spike." "You were there." "I was indeed. 1 hour, Mr. Woods." The line went dead, leaving me staring at the silent phone, my mind racing. Eric's father wanting to meet about the ticket could only mean one of two things. Either they were aligning their legal strategy, or William was coming to twist my arm into settling with Kara. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let curiosity die before it pulled me into deeper trouble. But another part, the part that hated unanswered questions, wouldn't let it go. Murphy's Diner sat on the corner like a stubborn relic of another time, a place that had survived decades of failed restaurants and changing trends. Its red vinyl booths gleamed under the glow of neon signs. The checkered linoleum floors worn smooth by generations of regulars. The air smelled faintly of bacon grease and strong coffee, the kind that could wake the dead. I spotted William M. immediately. Even in a room full of locals in jeans and ball caps, he stood out. A tall figure in a perfectly tailored navy suit, as out of place as a peacock among sparrows. He rose the moment our eyes met, standing with a formality that felt almost old-fashioned. His handshake was firm, precise, the kind of grip that told you this was a man who closed million-dollar deals without breaking a sweat. "Mr. Woods," he said, voice smooth but edged with urgency, "thank you for coming." We slipped into a booth by the window, the pale morning sunlight washing over the deep creases in his face. They weren't just lines of age. They were the etchings of decades spent in boardrooms, courtrooms, and quiet wars no one ever read about in the paper. Dolores, the waitress, who had been pouring my coffee since I was in my 40s, appeared without a word and filled 2 mugs, her practiced hand steady. William didn't bother with small talk. "I witnessed the entire exchange on Father's Day," he began, his gaze locked on mine. "Every word, every gesture. Your daughter handed you that lottery ticket and told you explicitly it was your Father's Day gift." I searched his face for cracks, a flicker of insincerity. Any sign this was just another angle in a larger game. "She's claiming we had an agreement," I said slowly, "about splitting any winnings." His jaw tightened. "That's simply not what happened. I watched her toss that ticket across the table with a dismissive laugh. No negotiation, no agreement, no verbal contract. It was a gift, pure and simple." He reached for his phone with the efficiency of someone who'd adapted to the digital world without losing his old-school instincts. "What my son and daughter-in-law are doing," he said, scrolling through his Facebook feed, "is unconscionable. They're dismantling your name with lies. You're Eric's father," I said, my tone careful. "Why would you go against your own son?" His laugh was short, bitter, because I raised him to be a man of integrity, and somewhere along the way he forgot what that meant. On his screen, a Facebook post was taking shape, his fingers flying over the keys. As a witness to the Father's Day gathering at Stephen Woods' home, I feel compelled to speak. I personally observed Kara Johnson purchase and present a lottery ticket to her father as a gift. There was no agreement to share winnings, no conditions attached. The ticket and any prize it yielded belonged to Mr. Woods. The social media attacks against him are based on falsehoods, and I will not stand by while my own family destroys the reputation of an honest man. "You don't have to do this," I murmured. "Yes," he said, eyes hard, "I do. My son has forgotten what it means to stand for something. Maybe public embarrassment will remind him. And with that, his thumb tapped post. Almost instantly, his phone lit up with notifications. Names I recognized from Columbus's business elite, men and women who had built fortunes on handshakes and quiet trust. The tide was turning in real time, the current pulling the lies out to sea. This changes everything, I whispered. William slipped his phone back into his jacket and met my gaze squarely. Mr. Woods, I built my business on integrity. I can't watch my own blood tarnish that for the sake of greed. We lingered there for a while, sipping cooling coffee, watching the diner's small dramas unfold. Families leaning over stacks of pancakes and elderly couples sharing the Sunday crossword. Teenagers ignoring their parents for glowing phone screens. Outside, the world looked the same. Inside, mine had shifted. The truth, William said finally, has a way of surfacing. Sometimes it just needs the right voice to carry it. Outside, we shook hands, his grip firm, reassuring. He walked to his polished black Mercedes. I stood beside my aging sedan, feeling something I hadn't in weeks. Hope. 2 weeks later, my phone rang. Mr. Woods, this is Janet Chen from the Ohio Lottery Commission. Your verification process is complete. We'd like to invite you to the formal check presentation tomorrow morning. Knee ceremony? I asked, still struggling to wrap my head around the weight of her words. We offer winners the choice, a private meeting or a public presentation. Given the recent public interest in your case, Janet continued, her tone both professional and gentle, we thought you might prefer the transparency of a public ceremony. I paused, letting her words sink in. My mind flashed to Carol's relentless social media posts, each one crafted to paint me as a thief. I remembered the sidelong glances in the grocery store, the neighbors who once waved warmly, but now suddenly found something fascinating on the ground whenever I walked by. Whispers followed me like shadows I couldn't shake. A public ceremony wouldn't just announce my win, it would clear my name. Yes, I said finally, my voice steadier than I felt. I'd like the public ceremony. Excellent is, Janet replied, satisfaction in her tone. 10 o'clock a.m. tomorrow at our Columbus headquarters. The media will be present, so dress appropriately. She paused, her smile widening. And Mr. Woods, congratulations. This is going to change your life. That night I prepared as if for battle. I laid out my best clothes, a navy blue suit I hadn't worn since my wife's funeral 8 years ago. The white shirt still held the crisp, authoritative lines of a professional pressing. For the tie, I chose the one Kara had given me for Christmas 5 years ago, back when her hugs were genuine and her eyes still held warmth. I lingered over it for a moment before setting it down. When I arrived the next morning, the Ohio Lottery headquarters hummed with electric anticipation. Television crews adjusted their lighting, beams of brightness cutting across the room. Photographers tested angles, their cameras clicking in staccato bursts, officials impressed. Suits moved with the precision of a choreographed production. Clipboards in hand, voices low but purposeful. I felt like a man who had wandered into the middle of a film set, only this time, I was the lead actor. Mr. Woods, Janet Chen approached, her smile warm and genuine, ready to become a millionaire. The ceremony itself was far more formal than I'd imagined. A large Ohio Lottery backdrop loomed behind us, an oversized check so massive it took 2 people to hold it steady. Camera flashes fired like a storm of lightning. When Janet announced me as the winner of the $120 million jackpot, the applause felt like it came from somewhere far away, muffled and surreal. I stepped up to the microphone, my hand steady, even if my heart wasn't. This is certainly unexpected, I began, my voice carrying across the room with more strength than I thought I had left. I plan to use this blessing responsibly, to help others, to revive dreams I'd long put aside, and to live the rest of my days with dignity. The questions came in rapid fire. How did it feel to win? What were my plans? Would I quit working? I answered them with honesty, leaning on gratitude and responsibility, rather than dredging up the ugly family drama that had driven me here. And then I saw them. Kara and Eric forced their way through the crowd, ignoring the disapproving murmurs. Carrara's face was flushed, not with joy, but with fury and desperation. She wore one of her important day outfits, a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly pension. "Stop!" she shouted, her voice slicing through the air and shattering the professional atmosphere. Heads turned, cameras swiveled. Reporters leaned forward like predators scenting blood. "That's my ticket," she cried. "We had an agreement." Security was already moving, but Kara pushed forward, her voice rising above the noise. "Everyone here needs to know he's stealing from his own daughter." In an instant, the focus shifted. The oversized check, the smiling officials, the celebratory air, all of it evaporated. Every camera in the room turned toward the confrontation, hungry for the kind of scandal that turns headlines into viral stories. "Ma'am, you need to step back from the ceremony area," a security guard said, firm but polite. Kara ignored him, her eyes locked on me like a hawk spotting prey. And in that moment, with 100 lenses capturing our every breath, I knew the fight for the truth wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I locked eyes with Carrara, feeling a steadiness I hadn't known in months. "Carrara," I said quietly but firmly, "please don't do this here." But she was far past reason. Her hands flew wildly in the air, her face twisted with outrage, as Eric tried in vain to pull her back. "I bought that ticket," she shouted, her voice cracking with fury. "I said half was mine. Everyone at that dinner heard me." The crowd seemed to lean in, hungry for the scandal. A reporter stepped forward, shoving a microphone toward me. "Mr. Woods, can you comment on this family dispute?" I took a slow breath, grounding myself before speaking. "The ticket was a Father's Day gift from my daughter," I said clearly, my voice cutting through the chaos. "Mr. William Johnson, who was present at that dinner, has already confirmed the circumstances of that gift. That's all there is to it." Another voice called out from the throng, "What do you plan to do with the money?" For a moment, I glanced at Kara, still shouting in the background, my mind replaying the months of manipulation, the betrayals that had chipped away at my trust, the years I'd spent enabling her worst impulses out of some misguided sense of love. Then I looked back at the reporters. "I plan to help others who deserve it," I said evenly. "I want to start a business I've dreamed about for years, and I intend to live with the kind of integrity that makes a person worthy of good fortune." The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur, firm handshakes, legal documents, the blinding flash of cameras. When it was over, I spotted Kara and Eric in the parking lot beside their sleek BMW, locked in a heated argument. Eric's arms flailed in frustration, his voice rising to match hers. From a distance, I could almost see their partnership cracking under the strain of their own greed. I walked to my car with the oversized ceremonial check tucked carefully under one arm and the official paperwork clutched in my hand. As I drove away, I caught a final glimpse of them in my rearview mirror. Two figures frozen in their own storm, and for the first time in months, I felt my lips curve into a genuine smile. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table, coffee in hand, the local newspaper spread open before me. My name, my photo, and the words 120 million winner filled the front page. The moment still felt surreal. Then I heard it, a car door slamming outside. I looked out the window and saw Carrara walking slowly up my driveway. Gone was the defiant stride of yesterday. Her shoulders sagged, her head hung low. Even from a distance, I could tell she was different. She knocked, not the pounding, demanding knock I'd come to expect, but three soft, almost hesitant taps. I opened the door, and there she stood, eyes red and swollen, her designer dress rumpled and creased as though she'd slept in it. "Dad," her voice trembled, Could we talk, please?" Despite everything, the part of me that had once carried her on my shoulders and kissed away her childhood tears stirred. I stepped aside. "Come in, Carrara." She perched on the edge of the couch like a bird, unsure whether to stay or take flight. Her hands twisted in her lap, and she glanced around the modest living room, the same one that had once been the heart of her childhood home. "I'm so sorry about yesterday," she whispered, her voice so faint it was almost lost in the stillness. I was just overwhelmed and scared. I wasn't thinking clearly. The tears came then, perfect glistening drops sliding down Carrara's cheeks with the kind of timing only years of practice could produce. "Eric's been pressuring me so much about money lately," she said, her voice trembling. "Our finances, they're worse than I've told anyone." I leaned back in my recliner. deliberately putting space between us, watching the performance unfold. What kind of financial trouble, Kara? She exhaled shakily as if the words themselves carried weight. We're about to lose our house, she said, her voice breaking over the sentence. The mortgage payments, the credit cards, Eric's business, it's all falling apart. We owe almost $400,000 and the bank has already started foreclosure proceedings. She began painting the picture in broad tragic strokes. Sleepless nights, panic attacks, the suffocating pressure to maintain the illusion of wealth while their lives disintegrated behind closed doors. Eric's investment firm was bleeding clients. She said they couldn't bring themselves to cancel the country club membership because of the embarrassment. Jake's private school tuition was draining their savings faster than they could earn it back. I was too embarrassed to ask for help before. She continued, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. You know how proud Eric is. He'd rather die than know I came here, begging my own father for money. But I saw through it every gesture, every inflection. It was the same routine she'd perfected as a teenager when she wanted something she knew I wouldn't freely give. The tears, the fragile voice damsel act, the appeals to my protective instincts. You've always been there for me, she whispered, her hand inching toward mine. Just one more time. Just enough to save our house and get back on our feet. How much, Kara? $2 million? She answered instantly, the number rolling off her tongue with the confidence of someone who had rehearsed it in front of a mirror. It sounds like a lot, but compared to what you won, it's nothing. You'd still have over $100 million left. Her casual delivery was breathtaking. $2 million, the equivalent of 40 years of my working income, tossed out like she was asking for gas money. I took a slow breath. Kara, I said gently, I've heard these promises before. Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of confusion breaking through the tears. What do you mean? You stole $13,000 from my account without asking. You humiliated me publicly on social media. You tried to take my lottery ticket by force, and now you're asking me to reward that behavior with $2 million. This is different, she insisted. The tears coming faster now, her voice climbing higher. I was wrong before, I admit that. But this time we're talking about losing everything. Our house, our life, Jake's education. You need to learn to solve your own problems, I said, my voice steady. The words landed like a stone between us. Slowly her face changed. The soft mask of vulnerability slipped away, revealing something sharper, colder. Her eyes hardened. You're really going to do this? She asked, her tone suddenly edged with steel. You're really going to let your own daughter lose her house while you sit on $100 million? Carrara's voice was sharp now, stripped of the trembling sweetness she'd worn only moments ago. I love you, Kara, I said steadily, meeting her eyes, but I won't keep enabling the choices you've made. She shot up from the couch as if my words had burned her, pacing toward the window, then back again. She crossed her arms tightly across her chest. Fine, fine. But don't expect to be part of Jake's life going forward. Don't expect Christmas visits, family dinners, or even a phone call when he graduates high school. The threats came rapid fire, each one aimed like a dagger at my deepest fears. No grandchildren at my funeral, no bond with future generations. A slow fade into a lonely old age. She wanted me to picture myself dying alone, punished for being selfish toward my only child. If that's your choice, I replied quietly, then I'll have to accept it. Something in my tone stopped her. She stared at me, the wheels turning, perhaps realizing her usual arsenal of guilt and manipulation had finally met its match. Her expression hardened. You've changed, she said bitterly. Money has made you cruel. No, I corrected her softly. Money has made me free. She didn't answer. Instead, she spun on her heel and stormed out, the front door banging behind her. I stood at the window as her car roared to life, tires shrieking as she tore out of my driveway. I lingered there a moment longer, staring at the quiet street, feeling a strange cocktail of emotions. Sorrow for the daughter I used to know. Relief that I'd finally drawn a line. The little girl who once curled up in my lap for bedtime stories was gone, replaced by someone I could no longer recognize, let alone save. I turned toward the kitchen and filled the kettle, my hands steady. For the first time in years, my house felt calm, peaceful. 3 months later, I stood in the echo of my empty living room, phone in hand, as movers carried the last boxes outside. My thumb hovered over Kara's name, then pressed block this number. Some bridges once burned aren't meant to be rebuilt. The drive to Dayton took me through rolling green hills and quiet farmland. In this new city, I wouldn't be the lottery winner everyone whispered about. I'd just be Stephen Woods, a man starting over. My new house sat on a tree-lined street 3 hours from Columbus, far enough away that an unannounced visit would require real effort. Henderson's classic auto restoration had been sitting on the market for months. The kind of place most retirees would pass by without a second glance. But the moment I stepped inside, the rich scent of motor oil and leather polish wrapped around me like an old friend. I could hear the echo of my younger self in the clink of tools, see my purpose in the dust-covered cars, waiting for new life. "You sure you want this much work?" Tom Henderson asked, nodding toward a row of half-finished restorations. "Most folks your age are thinking about slowing down." I ran my hand along the smooth curve of a 1967 Mustang's fender. "I'm just getting started." Within a week, Henderson's became Wood's Classic Auto Restoration. I hired 3 local mechanics, all fathers working hard to provide for their kids. Alongside the shop, I launched the Single Fathers Foundation, a promise to help men who were walking the same hard road I once had after my wife died. Evenings in Dayton were quiet in a way I hadn't realized I'd been craving. I could walk down the street without heads turning or voices dropping to a whisper. No shadows of old grudges, no footsteps of unwanted visitors. Just peace. The local diner poured coffee without the usual side order of gossip about my personal life, a small miracle after the chaos I'd left behind. "Settling in?" "Okay," asked Helen, my warm-hearted neighbor, as she handed me a tin of homemade cookies. Her smile was genuine, untainted by curiosity about my bank account or my family drama. "Neighborhood's quiet," she added, "but we look out for each other." "Quiet," I said, smiling back, "is exactly what I hoped for." And it was. The shop quickly became my sanctuary, a place where the smell of motor oil and the rhythmic clang of tools drowned out the echoes of old arguments. Working side by side with younger mechanics, I rediscovered a part of myself I thought had been lost. The deep satisfaction of solving problems with my own hands instead of with a checkbook. One afternoon, we finished restoring a 1955 Chevrolet to flawless, gleaming condition. When the owner arrived and saw it, his eyes filled with tears. He ran his hand along the hood as if touching a long-lost friend. I understood that feeling completely. I thought about Kara sometimes, but the sting had dulled. The ache was no longer sharp. It was a quiet reminder of the cost of boundaries. The truth was, the money hadn't changed me. It had simply stripped away the excuses I'd made for years. It showed me who I really was and who she had become. Occasionally, my phone would ring with an unknown number. I suspected it was her, but I always let it go to voicemail. Some doors once closed are better left that way. One Thursday evening, after finishing a beautiful 1969 Camaro restoration, I locked up the shop and drove home. On the way, I passed the community center where my foundation's plaque read, "Supporting strong families through tough times." I parked for a moment, stepped out, and tilted my head toward the darkening sky. Stars were beginning to appear, distant and untouchable. Somewhere under that same sky, Carrara was living with the consequences of her choices. I couldn't change that, but I could control what I built. One restored car at a time, one grant to a struggling father at a time. Each effort was my quiet vote for a world where character outweighed connections, where integrity was worth more than any jackpot. In my office, the lottery ticket hung in a simple frame, not as a trophy, but as a reminder, proof that sometimes the most valuable gifts come disguised as trash, and the most necessary lessons arrive wrapped in pain.